In part one, we looked at the legal standoff, the lawsuit filed by Minnesota to stop federal investigators at their border. But today we're finding our focus on the why. Why is the state of Minnesota so desperate to keep federal auditors away from their records? The answer is a number so staggering it's hard to wrap your head around. $9 billion. That's the estimated amount of taxpayer money that has vanished into a blind spot created by state-level incompetence and systemic fraud since 2018. We aren't talking about a few missing checks or a clerical error at the DMV. We're talking about a massive, coordinated extraction of wealth from programs designed to feed hungry children and support the most vulnerable in our society. This is part two of the Minnesota sovereignty crisis, the $9 billion heist. Welcome to the blind spot. I'm Lydia. To understand how we got here, we have to look at the Feeding Our Future scandal, which has now become the largest pandemic-era fraud case in the entire country. The federal nutrition program was designed to ensure that children in low-income areas had access to meals during school closures. It was a program built on trust, but criminals saw a blind spot. They realized that the Minnesota Department of Education was essentially rubber stamping applications without verifying that food was actually being delivered. They created shell companies, nonprofits that existed only on paper. They claimed to be feeding 5,000 kids a day at a single site that was actually a small storefront or even an apartment. They weren't buying milk and bread. They were buying $3 million mansions in Plymouth, luxury cars, and international real estate. And while this was happening, the state was being warned. The legislative auditor issued report after report, but the state agencies remained frozen. Why? Because the perpetrators knew exactly which buttons to push to keep the state from finding its focus. This is the part of the story where the mainstream media tends to look away, but we're going to look directly at it. According to documents of Department of Justice filings, out of nearly 100 defendants charged in these schemes, over 85% are of Somali descent. Now, from a conservative perspective, we believe in individual accountability. These individuals made a choice to steal, but we also have to recognize the environment that allowed it. The state government, in its rush to appear culturally sensitive and equitable, created a culture where questioning a minority-based nonprofit was seen as a political risk. If an auditor asked for receipts, they were accused of targeting a specific community. Identity politics became the ultimate blind spot. It provided a shield for criminals to operate with impunity, because the bureaucrats in St. Paul were more afraid of being called biased than they were of losing billions of your tax dollars. But the fraud didn't stop with nutrition. Once the blind spot was discovered, it spread like a virus. We are now seeing massive investigations into the Child Care Assistance Program, CCAP, and autism services. In the child care sector, we've seen ghost children, daycare centers billing the state for 24-hour care for children who weren't even in the country. In autism services, we've seen a 700% explosion in providers in just a few years, with billings that suggest some therapists were working 30 hours a day. Last I checked, there were only 24 hours available in each day, and that doesn't even account for any sleep time. This is what happens when a state abandons the rule of law in favor of trust-based oversight. When you stop verifying, you stop governing. And when the federal government finally says, "We're coming in to find our money," the state's response should not be a lawsuit. It should be an apology to every honest taxpayer in Minnesota. $9 billion are gone. The state failed to stop it. And now the federal government is moving in to clean up the mess. But as the investigation into this money trail intensified, a new kind of crisis began to erupt on the streets of the Twin Cities. In Part 3, we're going to look at the chaos that suddenly emerged just as the federal audits hit their peak. We'll ask the hard question, are these organic protests? Or is someone hiring agitators to keep the public from finding their focus on the ledger? Thank you for watching Part 2 of the Minnesota Sovereignty Crisis. If you missed Part 1, there's a link in the description so you can catch up. Subscribe or follow to be notified when Part 3 is published. And remember, keep searching to find your focus.